I think the problem is that the focus on this thing has been to do a tax swap. I don't think the people of this state voted for these people to go do a tax swap. They voted to cut the size of government. I'm on the board of directors of the Freedom Caucus PAC. We interviewed and endorsed some 40 candidates, 32 of whom got elected either to the House or the Senate. Every one of them pledged to us that they would vote to end the state income tax.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Today we have Barry Hugghins joining us. He's a businessman and a fiscal conservative who's been following the special session. Sorry for my words. I'm having such a hard time this morning. He's been following the special session on tax and budget very closely. Before we talk to Barry about what's going on at the Capitol, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Hebrews chapter 4. It's the first part of verse 3. And it says, "For those of us who believe, faith activates the promise, and we experience the realm of confident rest." And that really struck me when I was reading it this morning, and it made me ask the question, what is this realm of confident rest? And I really felt like the Lord showed me that it's the place where we stop striving to attain a right relationship with the Lord because of our faith in Jesus. We believe that He settled the matter with His death and resurrection, and now our part is not to strive because the work was done by Jesus. Our part is to let go of all the thoughts that cause conflict in our minds about our relationship with Jesus and our relationship with God the Father, and instead rest in the faith that what He said on the cross is true. It is finished, and our job when it comes to reconciliation with God the Father is complete and unwavering faith in the finished work of Jesus, and that brings us to the promised realm of confident rest that He has provided.
And it's all a gift, Danielle. Everything is a gift. Nothing we can do to earn it, as St. Paul says. Despite our mistakes and failings and shortcomings, the love is unconditional and faith is a gift. St. Paul says that God came to us, Christ came to us first, loved us first when we were mired in difficulty, mired in sin and corruption. He loved us first when we could do nothing to earn it. And quite frankly, there's still nothing that we can do to earn it. It's a matter of accepting the gift, which in itself can be hard to do sometimes when you think about the overwhelming love that Christ has for us.
It's true, but I love that He calls it rest, Chris, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to rest. It's not supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be settled.
It's supposed to be rest. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that we deserve it, but I guess we don't. But anyway, as you said, Barry Hugghins, a very successful businessman. I had a chance to listen to Barry speak the other night on this session, and we're so excited about having you on, Barry, to give us your thoughts and insights on what is going on down at the Capitol. Thank you for joining us today.
You're quite welcome.
What are your observations at this point? I'll tell you this, Barry, we've spoken to reps and senators on both sides of the aisle, and it seems to be the consensus at this point, from what they're telling me, that this thing is a mess. What are you?
So you've been to the Louisiana legislature?
Yes, sir. And some would argue, Barry, that is not exactly an anomaly down there, but they're saying that this is a particular mess. What are your observations on it, and what, in your view, can be salvaged from it?
Okay. You know the old saying that making legislation is like making sausage. It's much better to enjoy the final product than to watch the process. So, from that standpoint, what's going on is not all that unusual. And I would say that experience tells me if we get one or two or three good things out of this session, it will have been a success. You swing for the fences. If you can get a CNI single, you've done pretty good. I think there will be a few good things come out of this. There's been a lot of stuff passed out of the House. Nothing yet has passed out of the Senate. And I went through everything. We can go over these bills. There's everything in the Senate is sitting there waiting for final passage. Some of these bills have been amended. In fact, most of them have been that passed the House have been amended, which means now you go through the misery of going back to a conference committee, and the conference committee can rewrite the whole thing or it can just blow up. So I think the problem is that the focus on this thing has been to do a tax swap. I don't think the people of this state voted for these people to go do a tax swap. They voted to cut the size of government. I'm on the board of directors of the Freedom Caucus PAC. We interviewed and endorsed some 40 candidates, 32 of whom got elected either to the House or the Senate. Every one of them pledged to us that they would vote to end the state income tax. Now, our view is that you've got no state income tax in Texas, none in Florida, none in Tennessee. Mississippi is phasing theirs out, and they've been so successful that they have accelerated their phase out. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders has started the phase out in Arkansas. And so my favorite line that I didn't get to use the other night, Chris, is that if we don't get rid of the state income tax, we're going to be an island of taxation in a sea of freedom.
My goodness.
So, and here's the thing. With the internet, with the digital tools that you have now with iPads, with cell phones, you can run a business from just about anywhere. We truly are in a much more diverse geographical market for almost everything than we have ever been in the history of the world. So we have to compete globally and we have to compete nationally. And the only things that we get now are oil and gas because those deposits are here, or plants that need to be on the Mississippi River because they need water transportation or the pipeline network. And with the legacy lawsuit thing and our legal system in Louisiana and the problems that that's caused, with certain exceptions such as Northwest Louisiana with the Haynesville Formation, we just don't drill a lot of oil wells here anymore like we used to.
Yeah.
So, then that's one of the things that this session seeks to do something about. And we can talk about that in a minute. But
yeah,
we have to be able to compete. And right now we're not competing. And the net effect of that is that we've lost population every year for the last 8 years. And I'll be curious to see what happens in the first year of the Landry administration. I suspect that we've also lost population, which is not a slight to Jeff Landry. Politics is like a ship on the ocean. It has a lot of momentum. And even when you reverse the engines, it takes a while to stop it and turn it. So
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Yeah. Well, Barry, to pick up on your talk about tax swaps rather than tax cuts, it seems to me that the governor has made basically no meaningful moves this session to reduce spending. And after significant public pressure last week, I think LACAG played a huge part of that. he announced the establishment of a task force to look at making cuts to government spending. To me, it feels a lot like a bait and switch. Do you think that the legislature will move on his proposals just with the promise of future cuts?
Oh, I don't agree with a whole lot that Stephanie Grace has ever written, but she wrote it. She's a good writer. I just don't agree with a lot of her points of view. But over the weekend, she made a statement in an op-ed that she wrote that I have to agree 100% with, and that is this: there is no plan for phasing out state income tax or doing tax cuts, because if there was, it would be the centerpiece of this plan. And I've had that discussion with some friends of mine that are in the legislature that they don't want to vote for this because they want to get rid of the state income tax, and they don't see the reductions and the swap have been sold as being the first step, but there's no second step. And my answer to that was, okay, when you get an opportunity, just introduce a bill that says, an amendment to the bill that says we're going to drop it to 3%, and every year it's going to drop by 0.5%. So we're going to phase it out in 6 years. And the opposition's going to say, oh my God, what do we do if there's another Katrina? There's a catastrophe. And so you put a circuit breaker in there. And the circuit breaker is, if there's a catastrophe and there is a disaster declaration?
Yeah.
Emergency disaster, yeah.
Yeah, that the legislature can suspend that year's reduction by 2/3 vote, which you'd have no problem getting if there were a legitimate catastrophe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Barry,
yes,
that's such an interesting point. You're saying that there really is no ultimate intention, despite what they say, to completely eliminate the state income tax, because they could be doing that right now in legislation. In other words, passing legislation that establishes that that's going to occur within 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. But they're not doing that. So that's evidence to you that there really isn't the will to completely eliminate the state income tax, right?
Chris, throughout my whole life on the federal and state level, you've seen the same thing. We've got to do the revenue enhancements now. We're going to do the spending reforms later, and they never.
Yeah.
And they never do it. And that goes straight to Danielle's question about whether or not the legislature in good faith could accept Governor Landry's ostensible commitment to form the task force, figure out ways to reduce spending, and there's a possibility that may never happen.
Well, Scott McKay has a real good idea, and that is do the tax cuts. You've got, if you do the tax cuts now, you've got 3 months and a week before the fiscal session starts.
Get your pens ready.
You can see what the effects of the tax. Yeah, you can see what the effects of the tax cuts are. I can promise you it will not take 3 months to figure out where you can cut the budget. And I've got some numbers that I want to present that I looked up that I think are going to shock you. And they're head shaking numbers.
Yeah. And let me ask Barry, because what I'm asking you right now is going to dovetail straight into what to that point.
Okay.
I'm going to take one agency only, the LDH.
Yes.
They've been approached about cutting their budget, the LDH budget, and they come back and say, okay, well, we can cut, but the only thing we can cut are disability services to people. And so it creates great sympathy. Well, nobody wants to cut services for the disabled. So basically, that's their way of sort of ending the argument. We can't cut anywhere else. But there seems to be, there has to be some real cuts that are meaningful. Paul Hurd is proposing a 5% cut across every state agency. And I'm really interested in hearing your numbers and where you think real cuts can be made.
Okay. First off, what you've just described is called the Washington Monument Strategy. Okay? When there's a budget shutdown, a government shutdown in Washington, what do they shut down? They shut down the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, the things that tourists come to see.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? Because they want to create the maximum amount of misery. Okay? So let me just say this, and then I'll address Paul's suggestion. Department of Health and Human Services, Health and Hospitals, spent over $100 million last year on advertising. I mean, are you kidding me?
Are you kidding me?
I mean, yeah, we're losing population, and they spend $100 million on advertising. There was another couple of $100 million that was budgeted that wasn't spent, and there's some thought that was done on purpose, because since it wasn't spent, it got swept into the capital outlay budget and funded a bunch of pork barrel projects like dog parks in Natchitoches. So, there's a lot of things that can be done, Chris. That there's a lot of manipulation with the budget. It's not too hard to start off and say we're going to cut 5% across the board. There are going to be places where you could cut 6 or 7, and other agencies, maybe you can only cut 2 or 3. You can privatize a lot of this stuff. Have you gotten your driver's license renewed recently? The easiest way to do that is to go to one of these private title agents. They charge you like an extra $5 or $10, and there's no line. There's nobody that's ugly to you because they're a state employee and you can't get fired. And you walk in there, you take care of it, you leave. So, there's a lot of things like that can be done, but again, you have to have the will to do it.
Yeah. And is there, so Barry, so there's no doubt in your mind that every state agency could go in and make, well, not everyone, but some, like you said, could make 6 or 7% cuts, some maybe 2 or 3%, but nobody's doing it. And there's been no discussion and no impetus seemingly on the part of the governor to get them to do it.
Well, I think they call that accountability. If there's no accountability for being fiscally responsible, then the people in these agencies are just going to spend the money. And part of it is the budgeting process, because next year's budget is based on what you spent this year. So if you don't spend the money, you have a hard time getting it for next year, which is an encouragement to waste the money.
Exactly.
Wow. So true.
All right. Let me give you some numbers that I think are going to blow you away. You want to know, could we cut the budget? Let me compare 3 states. I want to compare Louisiana to Florida to North Carolina. Now, North Carolina has a state income tax that they have reduced considerably. They have a Democrat governor and Republican legislature. Florida, of course, is a hard red state. And then we have Louisiana. Louisiana's budget last year was $49.63 billion. I say that's the 24-25 budget. We have 3.56 million people. That's $13,941 per citizen. Florida, their state budget was $116.5 billion for 24-25. They have 23 million residents. That's $5,065 per person. North Carolina had a state budget of $34.5 billion for 24-25, 10.8 million population. They're spending $3,194 per person.
And I guarantee you,
So
both states have better roads than we do.
They have better outcomes for the dollars spent.
So North Carolina, Barry, its government is spending per person $10,000 less than the Louisiana state government is spending on its citizens.
That's what it looks like. Yes, sir.
Spending from its citizens, not on its citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, that is just absolutely jarring.
It is jarring. Yeah. I say that because I believe a lot of that money is extraordinarily wasted, obviously.
Well, so look, we over the 8 years of John Bell Edwards, we just about doubled the state budget. All the while, we were losing population.
And to add to that, Barry, the proposed tax on services for this session, back to your tax swap comment, that's gone over about like a lead balloon. Landry is now looking at making the temporary sales tax permanent and raising it. So we already have the highest sales tax in the country, and it's poised to go even higher. And as you mentioned, Democrats and Republicans have been all over Landry in the media, and I think rightly so. What does he need to do to regain public trust in the middle of all this debacle?
Well, I think probably if I were Jeff Landry, and I know Jeff Landry's a good man, okay? If I were the governor, I believe what I would do is I believe I'd get off the fourth floor and go down to the Senate chambers, and I believe I'd have some conversations, and I believe I would try to get past the 2 or 3 or 4 things that are pretty much doable, like consolidating these trust funds and opening them up where you can use a considerable amount of the money to pay down accrued unpaid liability, unfunded liability in these pension funds.
Yeah.
And then require which will free up a lot of money for the parish school boards, and then require them to use that freed up money to make teacher pay raises, which takes the burden off the state. And that takes a burden off the state going forward. I believe I would do that. I think I would try to get the severance tax cut, because we now have the highest severance tax in the nation as far as the amount of severance tax on produced oil and gas. Okay, here's the point. If you cut the severance tax, you remove a big obstacle to drilling new wells. So this is a case where it's extremely, and Jeff's an oil and gas guy. I mean, it's extremely reasonable to assume if you do that, you're actually going to bring in more money because you're going to have more production. Okay? I believe I would focus on those things. I think everybody is pretty much in agreement about getting rid of the corporate franchise tax, because I think we're one of only like 5 or 6 states that still charge that. That's doable. You know, the sales tax thing has pretty much blown up. And it may well be that trying to do this over a very compressed special session was just a bridge too far.
Yeah.
You know?
Barry, I think that's a great point. I agree with you 100% about the corporate franchise tax. Is your understanding about the corporate franchise tax, Barry, that the guy wants to go into business and he has to borrow a bunch of money to try to make his dream come true and build a business, and let's say the business fails, well, he has to pay a tax on the money that he borrowed in addition to paying that money back?
Yeah,
I just find that so bizarre. You know, it's crazy. I understand paying your loan back, but why would you have to pay a tax to the government on that?
Well, it is a part of the calculation of your assets. Now, how in the world borrowed money can be considered an asset? It's beyond me. You know, I see, you know, I'm a chemical engineer, and I've got a technical background, went to work for a chemical company when I was 22 years old. And my first boss told me, you don't need to go get an MBA, because working for me for 3 years, you'll learn more. I learned how to run a business. I don't learn how some of these financial people calculate things. You see, like they calculate an enterprise value where they figured certain things and they add debt into it.
Yeah.
And I've never understood that calculation either, Chris. But it seems to be the same kind of thinking that they do with the corporate franchise tax.
Yeah, clearly that needs to go. Clearly that can go. And I mean, it sounds like what you're suggesting here is that Governor Landry needs to salvage what he can salvage, win what he can win, and then just live to play another day.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn Movie Store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn Movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series.
I think they call it the art of the possible.
Yeah.
And you know, my experience with Jeff is that he's a practical guy, and you can't let perfection be the enemy of good here. And the old saying, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And if we can come out of this special session with some things that are improved, then let's take the improvements and go on about our business.
Well said. Well said. Speaking, Barry, to a number of legislators who are close to our organization, they seem to be, and this is just kind of my perception, they seem to be getting their legs under them. They seem to be willing to stand up and resist things that the governor is putting forward that they realize are not only not in their best political interest, but really not in the best interest of Louisiana citizens. I'm sure they recognize the consequences of whatever vote they make here. Is that kind of your understanding, that there does seem to be some developing backbone down there at the Capitol?
Yeah, I think so. And what concerns me for the governor is that if you put forth something and people trust you and they vote for it, and then there turn out to be, I think the buzzword is unanticipated consequences.
Yeah, like being involuntarily retired.
Yes, then
Right.
then what happens is you start losing credibility, and I don't want to see that happen. I supported Jeff, and I still support him, and I want to see him be successful. So, I think we need to take what we can get out of this and move forward.
Yeah.
No question about that. Couldn't agree with you more.
It seems like it's a time to make some adjustment.
Well, there are, and there's some other good things that could come out of this. I mean, there's you've got this thing, but Brett Guyman has a couple of bills that limit the growth of government, put some caps on what can happen based on inflation and based on population increase or decrease. And I think those are good things. So, this is, you don't have to have everything that was proposed in the call pass in order to have a successful session.
That's right. And that's a great point to make. Also on December 7, Barry, as you're full aware, a couple of 2 or 3 constitutional amendments that I think are good.
Mm-hmm.
One would allow the legislative session to extend by 2 days at a time to allow the legislature, particularly the House, to review any amendments that were sent back over on appropriations bills, so we avoid the debacle that we had on the final minutes of 2023 on the House floor. Also, and amendments like that I think are good constitutional amendments that'll be on there that hopefully will help the legislature to be able to review some of these appropriations bills and prevent the kind of disaster that occurred in 2023.
Chris, my take on that is the only people who vote against that amendment are the people who don't understand it in the leadership of the Senate.
Well said.
Because they play this game every year where they hold House Bill 1 until the House has no time to do anything. And then they rewrite it the way they want and send it back to the House and say, okay, here it is. You got no choice.
Give us a rubber stamp. Yeah.
So,
you got 10 minutes to look at it. That's the deal. So, but these constitutional amendments, Barry, will be on the statewide ballot on December 7th. So citizens of Louisiana hopefully will overwhelmingly, codify those amendments. You'd think so.
You would hope so. You would hope so. Like I said, the only reason that I can see anybody opposing that amendment and really all 4 is if they don't understand them.
Yeah. What's going on? Yeah. Well, we're going to have you back on to talk about just a show in itself, the carbon capture. I had a really great experience listening to you present the carbon capture just from a purely objective scientific view. This is probably a year ago or so. And
it was.
Really enjoyed that. So we're going to have you on to share your thoughts on the carbon capture with our listeners in the future. We look forward to that. But as always, what a pleasure to talk with you and to have you on the State of Freedom. And we're just grateful to have you participating in this process because you're a great American, Barry.
Well, always good to talk to you, Chris, and nice to meet you, Danielle. And tell everybody to go on December 7th and vote for Sid Edwards.
That's right.
Wow. Yes, indeed. We've endorsed him. Very happy. And Barry, I'll tell you, I think he can win this.
I think he can. I think he can.
God bless you, sir. Have a great
Thank you,
day.
Barry.
All right.
Have a
See
great
y'all later.
day.
Thanks.
Bye.
You bet. Yes, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.